chapter 13. Not sure if I'm going to do the whole chapter or just do it in part because it's really hot out here and I'm already getting sweat in my eyes. This chapter is named Satan and Sex. Assuming that the identification can be made that demons from hell and humanoids from space are one and the same, is there any evidence of their interest in sex? This was the crucial point in Genesis 6. The sons of God married the daughters of men and had offspring with them. Is there any other documentation that would link the demonic world with this very human trait of sexual desire? Hollywood seems to reflect very adequately the seamy and sexual side of American society. It has known for many years that illicit sex is its best-selling merchandise. Because of this, Hollywood has churned out an avalanche of movies majoring on obscenity and vulgarity of all sorts, voyeurism, bestiality, and all the other stuff that back when this book was written was illegal or hidden away. But what of sex films that include the demonic world within their purview? Do Satan and sex go together? Hollywood may think that it has said it all and covered every sin in the catalog, but actually, Hollywood has not said it all. The savants of the celluloid empire have still to portray the ultimate, and when that sin is committed, it will be viler than fornication, adultery, and all the other stuff that could get me dinged. Put together. It is carnal relations with extraterrestrial beings. I don't know. This was in the 70s, remember, and it's 2022. That movie's probably already been covered. Some of Hollywood's productions have got close to it, but the ultimate is still to come. This will be sexual union between women of earth and demons of hell. I don't watch a lot of creepy stuff, but I have a feeling this is already taking place in 2022, between 1970 something and 2022 anyway. A natural response is to gasp and say, "Impossible! Such a thing can never happen." The very premise of this chapter is to say, it has happened. Genesis 6 supplies the documentation. This happened back a long time ago in the days of Noah. But what is of frightening import to our generation is that the New Testament predicts that some of the distinctives of the days of Noah will be repeated at the end time. And as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the Son of Man. Luke 17:26, King James Version. But why should Satan be interested in sex? In what way can he advance his cause by intermingling of demons and humans in sexual relations? One reason may be found in his desire to downgrade woman. He remembers that Christ came as the seed of the woman. Another reason is his desire to get back at God. As Dr. Heimer states in his manuscript, Sex and Prophecy, since he cannot hurt God himself, he attacks men who God loves. Thus, he indirectly attacks God, and one of the devil's most powerful weapons against humanity is to twist and pervert man sexually. Knowing this, his time is short, he accelerates his activity. The devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. Revelation 12:12. But there is another reason the devil uses sex and the final accumulation, the O word, O-R-G, fill in the blank, to implant his ideas into his victim's mind. He is aware that one of the human experiences that comes closest to the ecstasy of communication with God is that of the same O word, O-R-G, etc. between lovers. If ever a human being acts as if he were possessed without actually being possessed, it is when he is overwhelmed by the irresistible tide of desire. Here he trembles, groans, writhes, cries out, in a bittersweet experience that defies description. William Sargent points out another similarity. It is significant that having, knowing, and possessing are among our commonest expressions for intercourse, for they suggest that the real goal and summit of sexual activity is not the procreation of children or even erotic pleasure, but rather the sense of mingled identity that lovers briefly achieve, the acquisition of another human being who, if only momentarily, seems to become part of oneself. Numerous Christian mystics have described the human soul as the female, surrendering to and possessed by God as the male. This may be the reason why German mystic Henrique Suso referred to himself throughout his autobiography as she. Manipulating sex. Satan used and manipulated sex to give man a simulated spiritual ecstasy, but rather than the ecstasy being divine, his version has been demonic. In this way, Satan has succeeded in introducing his thoughts and ideas into man's being under cover of an erotic ravishment, and by the same method, he has been able to confirm and consolidate his work. Donald Nugent in Renaissance and Rise of Witchcraft says, "There seems to be certain common denominators found rather universally in witchcraft. It particularly orients around two things, sexuality and power, often fusing the two." Ken Philpott illustrates this from a personal counseling session. A 28-year-old junior college student came to see me, for he had heard that I knew something about demon possession. He had worshipped Satan with Anton LaVey's group in San Francisco and became a member of the Church of Satan, having sold his soul to the devil. In exchange for his soul, he was to receive power to make money. It worked. He made lots of money with very little effort. Then he made a switch. Instead of power to make money, he wanted power over women. He received that too. When he met a woman he wanted, he would concentrate on her. Before the day was out, the woman would either show up at his door or call him on the phone. He came to me because the women told him that he was strange, you'd think. Several told him he was a demonic. After we talked a long while, he reached a conclusion. He didn't want Jesus because, he said, I'd lose my power. In most cases, Satan has been satisfied in using eroticism between humans as a vehicle for his devices. However, there are many instances where he has engaged demons more actively in the sexual process. Such demonic enslavement to a lustful sex is known as incubacy and succubacy. No aspect of demon possession is more revolting. Novelists have woven many story plots around satanic intercourse and impregnation. Examples from contemporary literature are Rosemary's Baby by Ira Levin, The Violent Bear It Away by Flannery O'Connor, The Devil's Own Dear Son by James Branch Cabal, The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner, and Black Eater by James Blish. But perhaps the most grotesque description of all is that by Isaac Bashev Singer in his novel Satan and Gore. Here demonic sex and demonic oppression are laid bare in front of us. Incubacy and succubacy. But these are imaginary stories. What of historical facts? Do we have any evidence from history that relates to incubacy and succubacy? In his classic, De Savante Day, Augustine states, it is a widespread belief that sylvans and fauns, commonly called incubi, have frequently molested women, sought and obtained coitus from them. Witch trials frequently supplied testimony from women alleging they had sexual intercourse with incubi. And according to W. Raymond Drake, men also describe delightful nights with beautiful succubi. It is common knowledge that tantric cults of the East, Nave, used sexual intercourse in order to induce possession by demonic powers. This is not exactly the same as incubacy and succubacy, but the end result is frequently similar. Orleans, France, the year 1002. There is evidence from France, from the 11th century, of this association of sex and Satanism. In 1002, in the town of Orleans, a number of heretics were put on trial at Christmas time. Along with heretical doctrines, the accused were also charged with something that was quite different in character. Gathered indeed on certain nights in a designated house, everyone carrying a light in his hands, and like merrymakers, they chanted the names of demons until suddenly they saw descended among them a demon in the likeness of some sort of little beast. As soon as the apparition was visible to everyone, all the lights were forthwith extinguished, and each with the least possible delay seized the woman who first came to hand to abuse her without thought of sin. Whether it were a mother, sister, or nun whom they embraced, they deemed it as an act of sanctity and piety to lie with her. When a child was born of this most filthy union, on the 8th day thereafter a great fire was kindled, and the child was purified by fire in the manner of the old pagans, and so cremated. Its ashes were collected and preserved with as great veneration as Christian reverences wont to guard the body of Christ, being given to the sick as a viaticum at the moment of their departing this world. Messed up. The Black Mass. Later in the same century, again from France, the Black Mass was devised and recited. Composed as a parody of the Roman Catholic Mass, it was celebrated to cause harm to one's enemies and to spread the influence of evil. For the bread and wine of the Holy Sacrament, they substituted such vileness as a toad, a turnip, a mixture of blood, urine, and feces. I believe nowadays they refer to that as spirit cooking. It was alleged that little babies were sometimes sacrificed in the ritual, and of course, sex acts were committed. It is claimed that Madame de Montespan, mistress of Louis XIV, offered herself sexually as a living sacrifice in order to retain the king's love. With the passage of time, sex orgies became a commonplace, and all sorts of radical hedonistic practices were introduced. In the 18th century, hellfire clubs, all I'm going to say is Stranger Things Season 4, sprang up all over Europe, counting among their patrons some of the leading aristocrats of the day. In one such club, Medmenham Abbey in England, membership included several earls and the Chancellor of the Exchequer. However improbable these happenings may have seemed to some people, they should cause no problem to us today. With the resurgence of Satanism and the appearance of cults like that of the Manson family, indulging in promiscuous orgies and ritualistic murders, their credibility can no longer be questioned. San Francisco, 1966. The Church of Satan in San Francisco is a typical example. Anton Szandor LaVey established this church in 1966 after receiving his demonic empowering on the night known as Walpurgisnacht, the most important festival of the lore of magic and witchcraft. This church is reputed to have up to 10,000 members. In 1968, LaVey published his Satanic Bible, a parody of the Holy Scriptures. Here are some choice verses. Blessed are the powerful, for they shall be revenged among men. Cursed are the feeble, for they shall be blotted out. Blessed are the bold, for they shall master the world. Keyword, world. Cursed are the righteously humble, for they shall be trodden down under cloven hooves. A thoroughgoing extrovert, he had the word vampire, V-A-M-P-Y-R, imprinted on his automobile license plate. He even kept a lion as a household pet. LaVey's satanic weddings have gained him much notoriety, and so has his ritual of using a nude girl as an altar. All over the world, including American cities, there are churches dedicated to the worship of His Infernal Majesty Satan. Such devil worship involves actual communication with evil spirits and with principalities and powers. Here the whole atmosphere is charged with terror and nausea. Often devotees use a ruined or deserted church, sometimes an overgrown cemetery. The ritual begins at 11 o'clock at night, aiming to finish at 12. Central to the ceremony is an altar with black cloth, 6 black candles, a chalice, and a crucifix turned upside down. The altar is a naked woman lying on a table and holding black candles in her hands. The priest consecrates the host on her bare stomach. The Black Mass is the Roman Catholic Mass verbatim, with the word Satan substituted for Christ. The Roman Catholic host is often stolen from the real Mass in a handkerchief. The high point of the ritual comes when the priest has intercourse with the girl on the altar, an act often accompanied by crude sadism. Many such evenings end with drunken dancing, drug taking, and a general orgy. Often the next day they are found skinned cats, beheaded chickens, or ritual bags containing drugs, potions, animal bones, and occasionally human fingers. Somebody left without a finger or two. In close association with rites of these kinds are the bizarre and demonic cults that have reappeared in our Western societies in the last few decades. There can be no mistake about it. When one falls prey to demonism, he has reached the ultimate in occult practice. Here the color is no longer gray, but rather midnight black. Is there biblical evidence? Evidence abounds in legends, literatures, and actual history that Satan uses ORGA for his nefarious purposes. That demons and humans come together sexually. One question remains. Beyond Genesis 6, is there any evidence in the Bible of such things taking place? Yes. In Isaiah 34:14, the wild beast of the desert shall also meet with the wild beast of the island, and the satyr shall cry to his fellow. The screech of the owl also shall rest there. On the surface, the evidence seems obscure. The key to interpreting this passage is screech of the owl. The original Hebrew word is Lilith, a word that has caused no end of difficulty in translation. Many modern versions translate the word as night creatures, but this is equally obscure. Most scholars now believe that the word is borrowed from the Assyrian and refers to the female demon of the night. In Assyrian mythology, Lilith was a female demon and succuba and had intercourse with men in their dreams. Sodomy and Sodom. One should also read Genesis 19. Here one finds a more direct reference to sex relations between spirit beings and human beings. Two spirit beings from heaven visited Lot in the city of Sodom and warned him of the impending doom of the city. The depravity and degradation of Sodom was such that God decided to destroy it. The city had become a veritable cesspool of iniquity, with its stench reaching to the highest heavens. Side note, Book of Yasher goes into the descriptions of what was going on in these cities. Not just a variety of sex stuff. They were also doing things, according to the story in Yasher, that if a stranger came into town, they thought it would be hilarious to, what's that medieval torture where they would stretch you till you just tore apart? Or tie you up. Hey, we ought to tie her up, so-and-so's daughter. We don't decide to pick on somebody. There was a young lady, they tied her up, poured honey on her, all over, poured honey, and then turned some ants loose on her. And she was there till she died. That kind of stuff was going on. Sick, twisted violence. Not just any and every sort of sexual activity, but the type of stuff. What do we have going on in today's world? A lot of sick, twisted, violent stuff. Yeah, there's all kind of other physical, relational stuff, but we're talking really twisted stuff. So that stench, the people crying out for help that were being harmed, whether they were raped, whether they were beaten, stretched out on one of those things and torn apart, or honey and ants and all that. So God had enough of that. It still remains a mystery as to how Lot, Abraham's nephew, could have become one of Sodom's leading citizens and yet be called righteous Lot. I guess compared to them, he was pretty righteous. But if he was righteous, it is obvious the other citizens were not. When the two spirit beings, or angels, arrived in town, the men of Sodom wanted to rape him. Here was new and strange flesh. And they called unto Lot and said to him, Where are the men which came unto thee this night? Bring them out unto us, that we may know them. Genesis 19:5. Shades of Genesis 6. Could the men of Sodom have known that Lot's guests were extraterrestrial? Jude 7 seems to suggest so. Even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them, in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh. Strange flesh indicates that that flesh wasn't like theirs. No, it doesn't mean that it wasn't someone they shouldn't be with, a human. This is flesh totally not like you, be it an animal or an alien. The implication is that their sin was not only with other people in town, but with extraterrestrials in the bargain. Humanoid - human sex. Many contemporary reports of ufology approximate the event in Genesis 6. In hundreds of reported cases, humans have been contacted by beings from space, and scores have been taken aboard space vehicles. Some of these incidents of sexual assault have been documented. Whether there is evidence of offspring as a result of those assaults is debatable. There is cause to believe in humanoid human sexual encounters, but we cannot say for sure that births of latter-day Nephilim have occurred. But the few cases of humanoid human unions that have been reported come close, uncomfortably close. Marlene Travers of Melbourne, Australia is an example. She claims that she was raped by a tall, handsome man from a UFO on the night of August 11th, 1966. When doctors examined her, they found burns on her arms and legs and that she was pregnant. A California woman reported a similar instance of rape by a spaceman and gave birth to an unusual but stillborn baby. Probably the best documented case of sexual assault is that of Antonio Vilas Boas from Brazil. This is an incident that deserves every attention and scrutiny. It occurred on the night of October 15th, 1957. A bizarre happening if ever there was one. In this instance, it was not a man from space having sex with a woman from Earth, but the reverse. How well documented is this case? Here we are indebted to Dr. Olivo Fontes, a physician, and Senor João Martins, a newspaperman, for the reports that have been made available. Both these men, it should be noted, were skeptical of the story when they first heard it. They both believed it too fantastic to merit credibility. Antonio Vilas Boas was a 23-year-old farmer from São Francisco de Sales, who claimed he was forcibly taken aboard a flying saucer and was made to have intercourse with a female aboard the craft. That night of October 15, 1957, Vilas Boas was plowing with his tractor when he saw a large, luminous, egg-shaped object flying toward him at a terrific speed. Suddenly, the object halted and descended until it was some 50 meters above his head. All at once, it lit up the tractor and all the ground around as though it were daylight. The pale, red glare of the vehicle was so powerful that the tractor lights were swamped by it. Slowly, the craft dropped toward the ground until 3 metal supports forming a tripod emerged from beneath to take its weight. Panic-stricken, Vilas Boas started up his tractor to make his escape. All at once, the engine died, and simultaneously, the tractor lights went out. Try as he would, he could not restart the engine. He then jumped to the ground and began to run as fast as he could. He was overtaken by 4 individuals and carried aboard the machine. After describing in some detail what he saw aboard the craft, Vilas Boas comes to the central feature of his story. This included a very detailed description of the woman. It also includes details of what took place between them, which are too explicit to print here. In all, Vilas Boas had spent 4.5 hours aboard the craft. While he was finally released and helped out of the vehicle, he made for his home as fast as he could. He was too ashamed, however, to tell the story to anyone, that is, to anyone except his mother. It was many weeks later that he contacted the newspaper journalist João Martins. After some reluctance on the part of Vilas Boas, the newspaper man was able to persuade him to relate his experience to himself and to the medical doctor Olivo Fontes. For 4 hours, they listened to the incredible tale. They subjected him to an exhaustive interrogation and cross-examination, but young Vilas Boas stuck to his story throughout, strange as it seemed. Following this, he was given medical and psychological tests, and it was discovered that yellow spots and sores had broken out on his skin, and that these seemed to indicate radiation exposure. People who further investigated the testimony of this small-time farmer from the Brazilian outbacks have reluctantly concluded that he was telling the truth. This whole subject is unfamiliar territory to most of us. The theme is so strange and grotesque that it takes a quantum leap of faith to accept it. But such things have happened in the past with biblical evidence to endorse them. It seems as we approach the end time, we are beginning to see a recurrence in a phenomena that baffles finite minds. Could the return of the Nephilim be the next item on the agenda? That concludes chapter 13 in the book. About the author, I.D.E. Thomas is one of a long line of Welsh preachers, and he has traveled extensively in Europe, the Orient, and on the American continent. His sermons have been described in the press as powerful and passionate, intellectually articulate, and spiritually probing. A native of Wales in the United Kingdom, Dr. Thomas has held 3 pastorates in that country: the Amman Valley, Caernarvon, and Llanelli, where he succeeded the Reverend Jubilee Young. For 10 years, he conducted special preaching missions in the United Kingdom and the United States. He also served as commentator for the BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation. So, pretty good credentials. Y'all have a great